Alright, let's talk about this. Let's talk about the budget myth. I'm already regretting this video. Why am I doing this? So every now and then, you will be online on a forum or something, and someone will ask the very justified question, what kind of money do you ask for? What is the music budget? What can we do? What do we ask for? How do we set our rates? And inevitably, on each of these threads, there will be someone who will claim, well, it's 3% of the overall budget. Or it's 5% of the overall budget. It's going to be some random percentage of the budget. I don't know why this keeps popping up. I don't know where this is coming from. Someone said it was written in some really old book somewhere. I don't know, maybe this was a thing like 30 years ago. I wouldn't know. I was probably potty training or something at the time. But it's been debunked by various composers, by various composer agents. This is not a thing. And maybe with this video, we can finally put this to bed, so I am never asked this question again. So let's go through the 5 main things why it just doesn't work like this. And then you will probably see why whoever is claiming this probably doesn't really know what they're talking about, or they've never ever negotiated a deal, because this is just not how it's done. So let's talk about this. So the first and most obvious point is that the market value for each composer varies very widely. To give an example, if I was offered a Pixar movie, I would not be offered the same creative fee as, say, Michael Giacchino, for obvious reasons. That's because my perceived market value is much lower than his market value. I have way less leverage in a negotiation. However, my perceived market value is much higher than, say, that of a recent graduate. So we all fall into some kind of bracket in the hierarchy, if you will, where a certain value is attached to our labor. That's just the way commercial art works, but that's also kind of how anything else, any other freelance service works. For example, if I were to win an Academy Award, my market value overnight would shoot up. I could charge more for no reason other than having won an accolade. It's just that my perceived value would increase because, I don't know, my peers said I'm at the top of my field and therefore I can charge accordingly. But have my skill set or experience changed overnight? No. I'm still gonna be writing the same music. I would still be doing the exact same job, but now I could charge more money. And as you can also see from this example, market value is not necessarily something that we determine ourselves. We determine it to a degree, but for the most part, it's kind of determined by outside factors that we have no control over. So creative fees can already vary widely, and so this is already where the whole percentage argument falls flat, because we're talking a difference of up to $1 million or something between 2 people. Number 2, budgets are determined at the beginning of the production, during pre-production. There's going to be a bunch of people in a room. There's going to be a line producer who is kind of responsible for the numbers and stuff, and they will predetermine how much of their budget is going to be spent on what line item. So this happens long before post-production, long before usually the composer is involved at all. It's kind of a misconception that composers just randomly decide their rates and then come into a negotiation and just say, I am charging X amount. Not really how that works, and also not how you would do it in any other job interview. You wait for them to make the offer. You never give the first offer yourself. That goes for any profession. If you go into a job interview, don't say your number. You will have a number in mind, but don't say it. See what they offer first, because you don't want to accidentally underbid yourself or overbid yourself so high that they're not going to consider you. So, it has to come from them. But more importantly to note here with those budgets, unless it's a massive studio production, there's gonna be a finite amount of money. There's not gonna be unlimited funds where you just get to tap into a massive pool of money. That's just not how it works. There's often just very little room for negotiation. So the production will already know during pre-production how much they can or want to spend on music. Even when I do studio pitches, like say a smaller TV show for one of the bigger studios, in the pitch documents that they send out, they will already say we will pay X amount per episode, and then it'll also already say we will pay additionally for, this and that much recording, or we will pay for SAG fees, or we will, whatever the perks are, whatever it is. They will also already say we would take the publishing and you would retain the writer's share. They will already have predetermined what kind of deal they want to make. And how much they intend to pay per episode or for the entire movie or whatever. And this is so that you can decide whether you want to do the pitch or not. Because you don't want to pitch for stuff and then find out that it pays way too little and you wouldn't have pitched for it if you had known that the pay was going to be so low. So by putting that information out there, the same way any other employer usually puts like a salary range out there for a job opening, they will already put it out there. There might be a little bit of wiggle room later down the line where you can negotiate perks, or maybe like you can negotiate an extra $1,000 or so per episode, I don't know. But, the ballpark number is gonna stay the same. It's not like they're gonna say, oh, we intend to pay you $20,000 for this project. If you're okay with that, pitch for it. And then you pitch for it, but then you come back in and you go, yeah, but I want $100,000. That's not gonna happen. And that would also piss them off because now you've really wasted their time pitching for something when you knew the deal and you went for it anyway, and they went through the whole process with you, and now you're asking for several times the amount of money that they said they were going to pay. So then they're just going to go with the second or third person in line, or you can take the deal. But so this way, everyone can make a very informed decision about whether they want to pitch for something or not. But so even on a lot of studio productions, if it's not the tentpoles, there's gonna be a finite amount of money that they're going to spend on this. And they will have predetermined this before you were ever even considered. It's a business decision. If they're making a small show and they expect a small return, then there's gonna be a finite amount of money invested because you don't want to overinvest and then not make your money back or not turn a profit. So it's much more of a take it or leave it situation than you would think. And then number 3, this is also a very important one, different genres need to spend differently. Is there a ton of visual effects necessary? Well, then a lot of money is going to go there. Is it an animation project? Well, then a lot of money is going to go on to, guess what, animation. Or say, is it a musical? Then actually a lot of the money is going to go into music. It's going to go into the songs and the choreography and the actors that now also have to be singers, musicians, score, because the entire movie is based on music. So, then yes, they're going to be spending a lot on the music. Is it a silent film or a partial silent film where the sound people have to do a lot of heavy lifting? It really depends on the film, how much money really needs to be spent on the score. Likewise, it also depends on what kind of score you're even doing. Is it gonna be a full orchestral score and they want you to do live recording? That's gonna be pricey, especially if you do it in LA or London. That's gonna run you at like $100,000 a day for like a 100-piece orchestra. That's not cheap. Or would they allow you to record somewhere else, like in Central Europe, for example, or Nashville or something? Then that would be slashed in half, that price. Or is it fine to record in Eastern Europe? Then, that would cost you a fraction of the price. Then you can go to like under $10,000 per day. So that's already a massive price difference. But also, maybe it's not even an orchestral score. What if it's a synthesizer score? Then you just need to spend money on, maybe a synth designer, and maybe you want to rent 1 or 2 hardware synthesizers. But you don't even have to, you could also do the whole thing in the box. Or is it a band type score where you're just gonna need a handful of musicians, a small studio, not the big scoring stage? You know, that's gonna be cheaper. Or maybe it's like one of those small minimalistic indie scores, like an indie drama where you just have a string quartet and a piano. Also way cheaper. Or maybe the entire score is just required to be done in the box, in which case you spend no money on live stuff. Or maybe it's a big band type situation, that's gonna be expensive. Maybe they want a full choir, that's also gonna be expensive. Choir is always expensive. So the raw production cost can run you at like over $1 million or literally under $10,000. So that's also like, you know, what kind of score do they want? This has nothing to do with the overall budget. You know, the overall budget can be $200 million, but if the entire score is really cheap to produce, they might just not spend a large amount of money on the score. Also, if it's an orchestral score, for example, or something with a lot of live recording, you're gonna run into other costs like orchestrators, copyists, anything like that. Do they want a surround or Atmos delivery? Then you're gonna have to pay for mixing. That's costly too. You know, it's like these things, they will already know what they want and what they have budgeted for. If they don't know, they will consult you up front, like what can we actually do with this amount of money. But if it's a studio production, they will already know what things cost, and so they know what they can expect for the amount of money that they're gonna invest. You're also gonna have to talk about like how the score is gonna be recorded. Are you recording the full orchestra together? Are you striping? Again, I have a video about that. You know, how many days of recording do you need? Or are you just sweetening with soloists? I mean, there's so many variables just in the production cost, just the pure production cost that's gonna vary so much from score to score. Like, we're talking a price range here from, say, $10,000, $15,000 to several $1 million. So, again, this has nothing to do with percentage of overall budget. This is just some things cost a certain amount of money. Then there's number 4. What kind of deal does the production have in mind? Is it a package deal, where you get the whole music budget and then you can spend it however you see fit, or like kind of a little bit in discussion with them, but you're pretty free to allocate the money however you want? Or is it the kind of deal where you get a creative fee that is separate from the production fee that you need to make the thing, like recording costs and stuff? Or is it a kind of mixed deal where you get, you know, like your creative fee, but also money for your assistants or something? You know, there are so many deal combinations, probably pretty much an infinite amount, that it's really hard to generalize anything here. And the filmmakers will already have a preference in mind. Very often they prefer package deals. And personally, I also prefer package deals. I like to have all the control over the money without having to ask permission for every penny that I spend. But, you know, other composers, I have had deals where I get a creative fee and then the studio controls the rest of the music budget and spends it on, you know, recording and stuff like that. That scenario is nice because then you're not liable for any extra costs that might, you know, like late fees or rush fees or whatever happens. When you get a package deal, you're responsible. So if you overspend, that's on you. But there are other perks to discuss as well, like who keeps what rights? Who covers travel costs? I mean, I have a whole video about contracts and a lot of the little points that are inside the contracts that you can negotiate, so you can check that out if you like. But there are so many other things outside of the initial fee that you can negotiate. And it's so situational again, like on a blockbuster production that you know is gonna have a wide release internationally in theaters, it's actually lucrative to agree to maybe a slightly lower fee up front because you're gonna be collecting so much money in royalties. There's gonna be so much to be collected after the fact that even if they offer a slightly lower fee up front, it's kind of okay. But maybe on a smaller indie production, they underpay you, or, they just couldn't match what you wanted. And then you agree to it by saying, okay, but then I keep all the music rights, I keep all the publishing rights, all the writer share, and I collect all the royalties. Normally with studios, you would give up the publishing share, for example. So that's something you can negotiate. What about soundtrack rights? What about soundtrack sales? What about sheet music sales? Travel costs, personal costs that you have from assistants or other people that help you. Food costs, premieres, first right to negotiation. Maybe it's the start of a TV show, or maybe it's a trilogy, so you can already negotiate that you're going to be on the others, like sequels and prequels as well. All of these things have direct or indirect monetary value, and all of these things can be negotiated. But again, you can't measure these against the overall budget. Like, how would you even measure this as a percentage of the overall budget, when a lot of these perks and a lot of these payments don't even happen from the budget, they happen after the fact. And then the last point, in general, you don't really know what the budget is ever. I think maybe out of all of the 60, 70 productions I've done, I've known the budget for maybe 4. And that's also just what people told me, or what it says, it's a random number on IMDb. I have no way of verifying this. Generally, only the line producer really knows how much money there is and what goes into which department, and he or she has all the line items, and maybe the accountant or something. But most people on a production don't really know what the overall budget is. Then there's also, again, the problem very often on a lot of productions, they get tax incentives, they get rebates, they get money back. They may be spending $50,000 in a region and then they get $20,000 back. How do you account for that? I'm sure they have a way of accounting for that. I'm just technically they had more money, but then they also got almost half of that back because they filmed in a specific region that has tax incentives and rebates, and they employed, a certain amount of people in that region, and And then sometimes this also covers travel costs and accommodation for the crew members and stuff. It's so many variables, and it's different for every country, for every region that offers this. It's impossible to track, at least for an outsider who doesn't have the numbers and who doesn't have access to any of this information. So it's not actually obvious how much money there is because there are so many variables at play again. Also, the marketing budget often equals the production budget, but it's usually not factored into the production budget. How do we account for that? Most studios that put numbers out into the public, those are not entirely accurate numbers because you don't really know what's in those numbers. Also, on smaller productions, it can very often happen that halfway through the process, an investor joins, a producer joins, a small studio joins, a distributor joins, and they might pump money into the production as well, while you've already made your deal and, you're already almost done with the score, and now there's more money. Can't really account for that either. In general, there's just no way to truly know the numbers. You have no way to access them, you have no way to double check them. I've seen someone suggest, well, if you really wanted to find out, you just have to do a little bit of detective work. Look, I'm not Sherlock Holmes. That's way too many things to, what? Also, how? You would have to make a lot of calls and ask a lot of random people that you don't know and they don't know you for their budget to then kind of figure out roughly what the overall budget is, and then you're probably still way off. And why would they disclose numbers that are under NDA before you've even signed on to a production? A lot of these claims just don't make any sense. If a random person called me and asked me what my music budget is on a production that they aren't even signed on for and I don't know them, I'm not gonna tell them. I've signed a non-disclosure agreement. So there isn't really a way to say the music budget should be X percentage of Y because we don't know why. So you can't do the math. You can't solve the formula. We don't know the why in this equation, and we never will, probably. And just understand, no one on the producers or production side is obligated to give you these numbers. That's proprietary information that they don't have to give you access to. They don't owe us the inside scoop of their accounting. They only owe that to probably their shareholders and the IRS. And that's about it. They will have a number in mind. We'll discuss that number, what they want for that number, if that's possible. If it's not possible, we're just gonna have a discussion and I will offer up a bunch of solutions and go, hey, this thing that you wanted, that has a certain price tag that we can't really move around much. But here's another option of how we can still get kind of the same result, but for cheaper. So that is then my job, to make that budget work, to give them options, to give them solutions. So it's really up to me to know all the numbers, to have all the quotes, and to kind of be like, I know how to make this work, here's an option. Because that's really half of what you're doing for these people anyway. It's what you're hired to do. You're presenting solutions to creative problems. Or budget problems sometimes. And then once those discussions are done, we'll see if we can reach an agreement that is good for all of us, and we'll be on our way. Or it doesn't work out. Sometimes deals fall through. And then someone else will do it. But what the total budget is completely irrelevant in that discussion. Because they could have a $200 million budget if they only want to spend like $500,000 on the score, or $250,000 or $100,000. That's their prerogative. They decide how much they want to spend. It's not like up to us to demand things. I mean, unless, of course, you have the standing, the leverage to do that, but most of us don't. So it's more of a, here's the deal, here's what we want, can we make that happen? And then you discuss that. Filmmakers are not some, evil people that want to rip you off all the time. They're all just working with budget restraints. They're all just trying to keep everyone happy, make deals that everybody is happy with, but, still get the product that they want, still get the quality they want. It's all a compromise. And so they're just trying to find that compromise with you. So always go into these negotiations open-minded and see, how you can turn a deal into something that is good for everyone. I hope this was helpful. I hope this has debunked this myth a little bit. I'm sure there are more points. I'm sure agents and other composers could tell more from their experience. But these are like the main points that usually are discussed when this whole thing comes up. So yeah, I hope this was a little bit more helpful. Again, I have a contract video as well, if you want to look at that. And also, if you want to buy me a coffee, feel free to do that. The link is in the description. I'm on buymeacoffee.com. I always appreciate caffeine. God, I'm tired. All right, time to get into editor Anne mode. See you next time.